Okay, welcome to the Association of Healthcare Emergency Preparedness Professionals January webinar on our research committee and what's research got to do with it. It's a title presentation. We're excited to have Julie Bolson here from Spectrum Health. She's the Director of Emergency Preparedness, and she is responsible for the oversight and of emergency preparedness for Spectrum Health, which includes 10 acute care hospitals, including a children's hospital and the medical group with over 3,200 providers. She's been instrumental in development of the first hospital-based decontamination response team in the region. She currently chairs the Regional Healthcare Coalition and has guest lectured at multiple nursing homes and emergency preparedness conferences, and has co-authored several preparedness articles related to healthcare emergency preparedness. We're excited to have Julie here to present on what the research committee has been working on so far in this first year, the inaugural year of this committee, and where she and the rest of the research committee sees going in the future. So thank you, Julie. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Christine. I'm happy to be here. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the research committee, the founding of it, where we're kind of going in the future, and there's some things that we need help with from the membership of the organization. So we'll talk just a little bit about that too, and maybe answer some questions that you might have related to research and maybe what we can do for you as well. So some of the objectives of this presentation, at the completion of the webinar, the audience that you will be able to verbalize some familiarity with what the research committee is all about, survey results and how they impact future projects, various types of literature that are out there and available to us, and really, you know, what that kind of means, and then some future AHEPP research committee projects that we're kind of looking at and working towards for the future. So the research committee was actually formed in 2017 after an organization-wide application process. So AHEPP put out the request for AHEPP members that may be interested in research or sitting on the research committee, and after that application process, the committee was formed. First meeting occurred in November of 2017 at the AHEPP meeting that was held in Dallas. And we've been meeting routinely ever since then. At least every other month. We've been trying to meet every month, and certainly in person if we can, and met in Scottsdale when we had the conference in Scottsdale. So one of the things that we decided to do through several conversations was, you know, really to identify what the research committee is doing and make sure that we were meeting the needs of the membership of AHEPP. And so the first thing that we did was to complete a member survey related to research and education, and really what the AHEPP membership was looking for from research. Did they need help with research? Are they just looking for research to maybe help solidify their program or help support program decisions from where they're located? We sent this survey out in January of this past year, so just a year ago, and had about 55 people respond to the survey with questions about, you know, some demographic questions. But then, have you ever used research in your organizations? And if you have, what was that like? And do you have a research committee within your organization? And several different questions related to that. So we're going to go through some of those questions and the results of that, and that really will kind of drive the rest of the information as we go through this webinar, and some of the questions that the research committee will be asking of the membership at some point in the future. So just some demographics. most of the, and as you see on these screens that are coming up, I've bolded kind of the largest groups in these questions. So looking at employer type, large hospitals, and then the other category. And as people filled in that other category, it was like public health and government and those outside of healthcare agencies, but those agencies that have some impact maybe on the healthcare from a response perspective. And so those were really the two areas of employer type that kind of fell out in the survey. And the hospitals were obviously the large hospitals out there. 19 out of 55 responded in this survey. The years of healthcare experience, we were really looking for to better understand that knowledge base that we're dealing with within healthcare, and whether or not they had been more involved in the public sector versus the healthcare environment. And so this one really came through at obviously 10 plus years in healthcare experience, which is important to us as we're thinking about that knowledge base within those healthcare organizations, and really maybe where we need to focus our efforts from an educational perspective, and really sharing research opportunities and being able to help support them in what their endeavors are. And then looking at the years of emergency management experience outside of healthcare. Again, as we look at the people that are responding to this survey from the membership of AHEPP, there is just a lot of emergency preparedness experience, whether it's outside of healthcare or whether it's inside of healthcare. So we've got some very senior, experienced people that are out there doing this work within healthcare. So needed to better understand really are organizations currently conducting or supporting research projects, and then if they're not, why not, right? So maybe we can help in that world, in that arena of supporting them in conducting research, or supporting them in a project, or helping them out in some way. More than half of the respondents indicated that currently their organizations are not conducting any research or participating in any current research studies. And really some of those barriers include, not surprisingly, right, lack of time, lack of funding, lack of the expertise needed to be able to conduct that research, and then lack of institutional support. So as a research committee, we would want to look at some of what these barriers are and see if we can maybe mitigate some of those barriers to help support members if they're interested in doing research and really getting that information out in the literature. So the next question was not only, now that we know that they're not necessarily engaged in a research project, but do they use research in their planning and, as they're going forward, and really looking at best practice and looking at the evidence that's out there. And so as you can see here, the majority of the respondents, 30 out of 55, stated that they did use research as they're looking at their planning, which is obviously we were very happy about, and it lends credibility to all of the planning activities that are taking place within healthcare. So looking at some of the survey results, the main sources of research that folks have been using are peer-reviewed journals, other journals. They are reaching out to the CDC or ASPR Tracy, looking at NIH, which is a great location for finding evidence-based practice out there. Other governmental agencies that might be participating and active in healthcare emergency preparedness, and then obviously looking at conference presentations and webinars. So then one of the questions we asked the membership was if there was any interest in receiving assistance from the AHEPP Research Committee with any of the healthcare preparedness research efforts. This one kind of surprised me personally, that there was a fair amount, obviously the majority of the membership stated that they didn't need help, which obviously could be a positive, right? They're very comfortable in doing the research out there. I'm hoping that it doesn't mean that they're just not interested in doing research or documenting the research or documenting their practice, because as we'll talk about in a couple of slides, really having that evidence out there for others that are looking at planning and developing plans and within healthcare is really important, and legitimizes the profession. So really looking at some of the projects that might be out there, and kind of teasing out some of whether or not organizations are doing research, what kind of research is being completed by our members. Some of the examples, might be research impacting local health department policies, or maybe healthcare coalitions are out there doing some applied research and really looking at, from a healthcare coalition perspective, how organizations are responding, and can we document some of that collaboration and some of that cross-discipline communication that might be taking place. Really looking at organizational best practices and getting that information out in the literature, and then obviously some success of educational programs, as we're looking at furthering the education of our staff and really looking at how can we help them be better prepared and increase their resilience during a response. So, really, as I had mentioned, why is it important to do research or publish the studies that we're involved in or publish our successes? Like I said, it really legitimizes emergency preparedness as a profession. And we are still, kind of in the infancy stages of our profession, but certainly getting that literature out there is going to help us become a stronger profession and really help our organizations understand that we aren't just a department that does work off the side of our desk, that it really is an important piece of a healthcare organization to have a solid emergency preparedness program. So it's also important to establish those best practices that are out there, so that we make sure that we are following best practices and that we are functioning at the highest level of planning and response for our organizations. Certainly, our studies can fit into a number of different types of literature that are available out there for others to really, glean some information from, but it's important to try to grow that field of emergency preparedness literature. Whoops, sorry, somehow I ended up with an extra empty screen there. So really, what kinds of literature are available to us? What do we want to look at, and what's going to be a strong literature for us? Lots of different kinds of information that's out there. Want to make sure that, again, it's a legitimate type of literature that we're looking at, especially if you're going to use that literature to support and really drive that that conversation home with your executives and trying to strengthen your program. So I'm going to run through just a couple of different types of literature where you might want to focus your energies as you're looking at literature to build your program. Primary literature refers to that original research and those original studies that are based on direct observation of actual practices. So that original research, if you're doing a study that you're not replicating that study, you're not validating that original research is accurate, and you're trying to get the same results as that original research, but you are the first research or the first study that's out there. That's what we're talking about by this primary literature. It's often follows some very specific characteristics. So it's going to be published in a peer-reviewed journal. It's going to include charts or graphs or some statistical analysis. It's probably going to be substantial in size. So you're usually looking at, and here in the definition, it says it's greater than 5 pages. You're really probably looking at least 8, 9, or 10 pages for this type of an article. It's going to contain an abstract, an introduction, methods section, a results section, typically discussions or why is this important research to put out in the field, and then definitely several pages of references. This is probably your highest type of literature that you're going to be able to find out there to help support your programs. Secondary literature consists of the interpretations or the evaluations that are derived from that primary source literature. So really looking at review articles, systematic reviews, those meta-analyses and practice guidelines. So after there's several different studies out there related to a topic, then you end up looking at these literature reviews, which are a great source of literature that will help you identify the majority of the research and what direction that literature is going. So it's a great place to look. Literature reviews are great reviews to look at to really determine maybe what is best practice out there, or what direction do you want your study to go in. The Cochrane Library is probably one of the best sources for systematic reviews on evidence-based practice. So that's a great resource for you to look at and to reach out to. The tertiary literature consists of really a distillation of that, those first two, the primary and the secondary resources that we just talked about. Looking at, people are going to be using that primary and secondary literature to write textbooks, articles, or to write handbooks or newspapers, or articles within encyclopedias or science textbooks and things like that. Lots of, obviously, the reference on this page, you could go and check that out. Lots of conversation within this reference listed at the bottom of the page here around different types of information, lots of different examples that you can use. So certainly make sure that you reach out and check that out. Gray literature is something that it's just out there, often found on the internet. So if you do a Google search for a topic, Google search on, communication during disasters, all of the stuff that you see when you do that Google search is really considered gray literature. The majority of it's going to be considered gray literature. Some of these are going to be non-formally published articles. Some of them are certainly going to be more beneficial than what others are. So you're really, as you're looking at that gray literature, you're really going to have to make sure that you really investigate and read through that gray literature to determine its effectiveness and how much it's going to benefit you in your program, in your program growth. So really looking at the AHEPP research committee again, and really what AHEPP has, what is the role of AHEPP in supporting healthcare emergency preparedness research? Some of the things that the committee has looked at is really how can we be a resource for research for our AHEPP members? How can we help support them in their research or their studies, or maybe it's even reviewing a study prior to doing it, or reviewing an article prior to publishing, or something like that. Looking at guidance related to research and how can we help in that arena. Education, obviously this webinar is one of the first things that we wanted to do to get the information out to our members on what the research committee is doing, some of the survey results like we had talked about earlier. What are some of our thoughts from a research committee perspective, and really is it going to be beneficial to our members? We certainly don't want to go down a road of a task or a project and find that it's not going to be beneficial to the membership at large. So one of the things that we had been talking about was developing an after action repository, and would that be beneficial to the AHEPP membership, something that they could actually go to find out what issues other organizations are having, and if they're having the same issue that you are having within your organization, what were some of the steps that they put into place, or the processes that they've put into place to maybe mitigate that issue in the future during any incident and response implementation. So we've been talking about that. We did actually do a survey at the conference in Scottsdale, and so you're going to see a little bit of the results from that audience survey. We had 19 people that showed up at our presentation in Scottsdale, and we surveyed the audience around some of the after action repository conversation, and we just really wanted to make sure that it would be of benefit to those organizations. So of the people that attended that session, 19 of them, the full complement, had said yes, they would see a benefit to the after action repository. So how would they use it? Certainly the bulk of the group, 44%, said that they would learn from others for plan development. Close, 41% would learn from others for exercise development. Some of them stated that they would conduct research using the repository, and then just a very small amount, in fact, it didn't even show up. I think it was like maybe 1 out of the 55, or the 1 out of the 19, said I would not use a repository. And some of that was related, I think, because of that person's entity would not necessarily allow publication into that. So would you be willing to submit after action reports to the repository? And again, the bulk of the people said yes. Certainly the majority of that response said if my employer allowed it. And then there was, again, I think one person said that they know that their organization would not allow them to publish their after action reports onto this repository. And so then we identify that some organizations might be concerned about it. So the conversation kind of shifted and said, would you be interested in submitting report highlights? Not necessarily your full after action reports and have information redacted out of that, but could you submit a summary of your learning so that people still might be able to benefit from that, really at a high level of a summary instead of the very specifics of the after action? 12 out of the 19 said that yes, they would be interested in submitting that, and they felt that their organization would be supportive of that, really to help the rest of our membership, right? It would be a secured environment, and we really want to be able to help the rest of our membership use those resources. So from a research committee, the intention is for us to continue down that path based on those survey results of building an after action report repository to identify some of those common areas of needed improvement. And as we were kind of talking about what would some of those areas be, obviously communication rose to the top, logistics, equipment, and then we really wanted to hear from membership if they could think of any other high-level buckets that we might be able to include in a form that we would have people fill out to be able to submit their information to this repository. So certainly, based on, we've got some open-ended questions from a research committee perspective. If anybody from the AHEPP membership has any ideas as to what they could send to us, please make sure that you send it to one of the colleagues, as you'll see in a couple of slides here, our contact information, and you can touch base with any one of us if you've got any ideas, or if you've got any questions, or if you want help from the research committee, or what you want to expect from the research committee, how we can help the membership. That's really what we're trying to drive towards, and getting some of that best practice out there so that we can make all of our programs stronger. We can help our organizations to understand the importance of healthcare emergency preparedness, and really where we need to go for the future and really building out and legitimizing that profession of healthcare emergency preparedness. So some of the follow-up questions: is there any interest in having the research committee conduct further education on how to do research? Is there interest in the committee developing a template for after action reports that we would be able to support that submission to a repository? And then should the committee really create a repository of peer-reviewed articles that might help you in supporting your program? So as you think about these questions, please don't hesitate to, again, connect with anybody that's on the committee. Certainly if there's any other questions that we didn't bring up during the webinar that you're thinking of as you're thinking about research in your program and how it can be utilized and how it can best support you, and how the research committee from AHEPP can best support you in your program within your organization and moving your program forward and strengthening that response, please don't hesitate to let us know. So this is the current membership of the research committee. So please, I believe that these slides will be made available on the AHEPP website, so please don't hesitate to connect with anybody on this committee. We can bring your questions and your concerns back to the committee at our next meeting, talk about them, and really try to push out information to the AHEPP membership at large. So Christine, thank you for allowing me. I think we're just about at time before the collaborating with colleagues start. So thank you for the time to be able to share what the research committee is doing. We're very excited about the work that we're doing and where we're going in the future, but really need to hear back from the membership on, you know, if we're missing the boat and we've got to course correct, then we are very happy to do that. But we can't, we won't know that unless we hear back from the membership.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Thank you, Julie, for all the information. And for those of you that are hopping on, this is a repeat webinar because we had some technology issues the last time we did this. So thank you for redoing this webinar and for this great information. I know for myself, I am always looking and hoping that people that are in the field of emergency preparedness in the hospitals working on this are publishing and doing their due diligence of research, because the more that's out there, the more, you know, that affects funding, and the more that you can make a case in your organization for more help, more supplies, more everything you need. So I think that everything that the research committee is working towards, and everybody that has been working on various projects within research and preparedness has been very useful, and everything you do is just so important. So thank you. I'm going to stop the recording of this.